This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, I'll get with Doug on it. We'll send out the PowerPoint, but I don't think it matters. What do you think, Doug?
I think that'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Michael, you want me to go ahead? Is that a yes?
I think that's a yes.
You're muted, Mike, if you're.
Okay, I'll get started. Started here, Michael. If you're going to kick us off.
Yeah, let me just do 2 sentences, and I'll turn it over to you and turn myself off. So one thing I want to do differently in STP going forward is start to kind of share successes on a monthly basis and then kind of an owners meeting or extended owners meeting like this. And in a way that we can actually start to kind of emulate what other people are doing that is successful. And they'll give you the statistics here in a second, but Doug and Ryan, who's his business development person who's joined him recently, have been really successful basically at targeting co-managed opportunities, and in particular had a wave of success in nonprofit co-managed opportunities. So what I want to start to do like once a month is basically maybe pick an industry or pick a service area and go through and say, you know, what can we figure out in terms of why we're being successful in this area, and to make sure that we share those best practices across the group. So with that, I'm just going to introduce Ryan Valdez. Ryan, why don't you just give actually it might be interesting to give people a little bit about your background and why you joined Doug and how it's been going since you joined him. With that, I will set this off.
All right, well, thanks for having me today. So I've met a few of you up in Chicago, so good to see y'all again. And I've been with Straight Edge since March of this year. A little bit about my background is I have about 15 years experience really in corporate America, working for Travelers Insurance and USAA in operational leadership, risk mitigation, enterprise catastrophe response, and came across Doug through a mutual friend. I was getting a little burnt out in the corporate world, but wasn't really looking for another job, and connected with Doug, learned about what he did, made some connections in risk mitigation. I don't have a big IT or tech background, but also with the cyber liability insurance, and then excited to also jump into an industry and learn. I have a pretty decent network in San Antonio. I think Doug saw that as valuable. Also plugged in with some of the local churches and some other kind of charitable organizations in San Antonio. And then I went to one of the oldest, well-known, only all-boys high school in San Antonio. So I think he saw that as some value. And so jumped in business development, but I think Doug and I have both been learning a lot from each other, and I think it's been going well. So.
Yeah, I'll add that our mutual friend told Ryan that we like sold the internet or something. So it wasn't like a hard sell from our buddy, but we were able to get on the same page pretty quick once we got to meet.
Yeah, he said that Doug sold internet to businesses. That's what he thought Doug did, and apparently they're like longtime friends. So.
Yeah, known this guy for like 10 years. I don't know why he thought that's what we did. But
yeah, that's kind of funny. All right, so I'll get started here. What we want to cover today in regards to landing some of the large nonprofit MRR is really 4 topics. So I'm going to show you some of the nonprofit deals that we've won, and I'll have Doug talk about a few of them. I'm going to also share with you one that we lost and some of my lessons learned. Also, why nonprofit organizations are good targets. I feel like I've dug in tremendously the past 2 months with nonprofits, learned a lot about their organizations and different types, and then give you just a quick summary on our current nonprofit outreach strategy supported by Connor and his team and one of our content writers and Michael. So we've got some good momentum, and it's been exciting and a lot of learning. So let me jump to this slide. So really kind of the intent of this slide is to show you a timeline of the nonprofit sales cycle, some of the key milestones, the end user counts, what we sold, as far as the services, how we made the connection, and the overall like new monthly recurring income that we've made since May. So we've landed 4 deals since May of this year, and we've lost 2. And in a second, I'm going to hand it over to Doug to walk you through a couple of the deals that we won. But before we get to that, I think it's important to understand a few major differences at a high level in the way some of the nonprofits that are on here function. So I'll talk about like Goodwill and South Texas Lighthouse for the Blind. Those are really working nonprofits. So kind of in short, Goodwill resells, right, all their donated items to retail stores, and all the profits are reinvested back into the company for growth, training, job creation. And the CFO told us that they're really competing with big box retailers like Target. So the approach with them is that they are kind of a for-profit company, but it's all reinvested back, which makes them a nonprofit. The South Texas Lighthouse for the Blind, so they create jobs for the visually impaired, and they have people that do manufacturing. So they manufacture gloves, brooms, and other items for the Department of Defense, and all their profits are reinvested back to sustain that and create jobs for the visually impaired. And then quickly, then we have the San Antonio food banks, but food banks in general, as I've learned about the way they operate, they rely mainly on donations and grants to fulfill their mission. And the San Antonio Food Bank, right, their mission is to feed 90,000 families a week. And they heavily rely on volunteers, right? So very different than Goodwill, South Texas for the Blind. And to put the financials in perspective for the food bank, in 2021, they had $217 million in donations and grants. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of cash that's involved with the food banks. So with that context, I'll hand it over to you, Doug, if you want to just walk through a couple of the deals that we won, and then I'll talk about the food bank.
Yeah, I think what Ryan hit on is that these working nonprofits, they have to stay like in business to fulfill their mission, and so they have all the same struggle that any other normal business that we talk to has. We just frame it a little different. We talk about their mission a lot. We talk about like what happens instead of talking about downtime. We talk about if it keeps you from fulfilling your mission. We really drove a lot of it back to like their mission. So the Goodwill one, you can see it was a long like cycle, over a year. Basically, it was somebody I knew through just my network of connections, and he was new. He's new to Goodwill in South Texas. He came from a larger Goodwill in Houston, like a larger organization. Each one of these regions of Goodwill, like they own a region and they can put their retail stores in that region. So he came from a bigger region of Houston to a smaller region of South Texas. They have 18 locations is kind of their footprint right now. But he basically came down and said, man, one of the first things I noticed was that they were not operationally mature in lots of areas. He was trying to fix a bunch of retail problems first, but he had IT on his like mind to be the like second thing that he wanted to fix. So started talking, he met us, we kind of talked through what we did and how it would help. We met their internal IT guy, which Ryan's been working on like some personas around the internal IT guy. But in this case, it was a gentleman that had been there almost 20 years, and he started off as like an executive assistant / office work kind of guy. And now he runs all the IT stuff. So although he's a very nice guy and very committed to their mission, he's way outgunned in like the current world that they're in, where every store is connected. They have cloud solutions. They have security concerns. It's a lot. It's a lot more than just getting a point of sale machine installed at a register, So he really was struggling and really needed help. And, just some of this normal MSP stuff we do around like centralizing dispatch, having a customer portal for people to enter in issues and customizing that to the client, and just some of the normal stuff that we do is really what's going to make the big difference for them. So they're, it's a retail play with a lot of locations is this, and then they have a corporate office, obviously. The second one that I wanted to talk about a little bit was the Lighthouse for the Blind, not unlike them. So this is, we actually went a little different direction with this. it's co-managed in the sense that we're working with their internal IT team, but we split off the security components of our offering and are only offering the security concern, to them. It's kind of a different offering than what we've done in the past. But in their case, like Ryan mentioned, they have government contracts, so they have to comply with MMC, and they were very far away from that and needed us to step in and basically, how do we make sure that they actually are doing the things that they're supposed to for compliance? So we broke that off as its own offering. Same thing though, working nonprofit. If they can't maintain this security level, then they can't keep fulfilling their mission, and they're going to lose those government contracts that they have. So that deal actually came in. I've never had this happen in my 17 years of doing this, but they responded to a magazine ad. We had a business journal type magazine that we participate with, and they said that's where they first saw my face and name. Nonetheless, working nonprofits, these aren't poor nonprofits. These folks have money and they have budget and they need help sort of figuring out how to spend. The other two that we have on this page, they're both actually medical practices that are also nonprofits. And that kind of combined two things that we're familiar with. We have a long background in medical. And then in the case of these folks, they're primarily government reimbursed. So they don't have to go get donations, but they don't charge their patients the same way a normal medical practice does. Those are two of the other wins that we've had this year. Anything else, Ryan, I needed to hit on that?
No, I think that's good. Michael, did you have anything to add before I jump into, I'm going to talk about the food bank, and we got news that we didn't get that deal. So.
Actually, I was just going to ask Doug to say a little more about the medical practices and what were the drivers. Was there any common drivers between the two about why they were seeking you out at this particular time?
Yeah, so they're a specific kind of nonprofit called an FQHC, Federally Qualified, I think it's Healthcare Center. These are all over the country, but basically it's like they charge the individuals based on income level, and then the government makes up the rest. So they're free clinics essentially. Both cases, they have they had a relationship that ultimately was falling apart, and they needed to change. One had an internal IT guy that they parted ways with, and then the second one had a like a parent company that they were parting ways with. Both kind of inflection points causing them to have to go look for IT support. Both were through people that we already knew. So one was through a local website development group that we're friendly with. They are the ones that connected us. And then the second one was us. It was a CFO that transitioned from one company to another, and she remembered us. And so when the time came for them to need to shop the IT, the CFO spoke up and said, I've used these guys, they're great, let's make sure we talk to them. And then ultimately we won. And on that one in particular, I actually think that was the big driver of us winning, because I feel like otherwise they had no way to actually differentiate the MSPs. They basically said so much. They were like, yeah, we don't know, we've got 3 people we're looking at and we can't tell one from the other. And I think the CFO was able to put in a strong word for us.
And did they have any unique compliance requirements that they drove it, or is it?
From an IT perspective, it's not like they have special security things that other medical practices don't. What they actually do have, though, is that they have an inordinate reporting requirement to get the government payments. So they have to provide documentation in a way that other medical practices don't, to be able to get paid on their services. So they all talk about these like reports. It's so freaking important for them to be able to get these reports out every month so that they can get paid. It's just a really critical business process in a way that's not critical for other medical practices. That's specific to the FQHC. There's only a certain number of medical record software packages that can produce these reports. So they're kind of limited in their choices. In this case, it's one's using Epic and then one's using eClinical.
You're
Go ahead, Ryan. I'll turn it back to you.
Yep. Okay. So I'll talk quickly about the San Antonio Food Bank, and we didn't lose that deal. So I mean, we lost that deal. So the San Antonio Food Bank, I was excited about it because it's one of the most well-known and recognizable nonprofits in South Texas in our region. And through surgical prospecting, I met the CEO of another nonprofit who connected me to the COO of the food bank. They have 230 end users. They're co-managed through a organization called Feeding America, which it's really a nationwide nonprofit conglomerate of 200 food banks. They provide the infrastructure and email hosting services. Well, I happened to get connected with the food bank as they were losing their IT director, and Feeding America determined that they were going to quit hosting organizations, and advised everybody who was dependent on them to split off from their main domain and tenant and to get their own. So the food bank started an RFP for a migration project, and we hit them right at the ideal time to get brought into that RFP. And I know we're not big fans of RFP, and I did RFPs, and I've had a little bit of lessons there, but I wanted to get our foot in the door for the migration project to turn it into managed services. But I learned a ton of information along the way. So their IT director quit, and long story short, he was there 2 years. He was pretty good, but their desktop technician guy, his name's Joe. He was a self-taught guy who started off as a delivery driver. Well, he was promoted to their IT director, so we worked kind of closely with him along the journey. And they have until September to fully migrate, or they're going to get auto-renewed into a one-year contract with Feeding America that's 3 times the cost of what they're paying. So we met with Joe, who's the new IT director, several times. Doug was also able to meet with him. What we wanted to do was plant seeds to move into a co-managed situation. You could tell in meeting him, he was pulled in 100 directions, and every meeting his phone was going off. He always seemed a little bit rattled. He was still dealing with his day-to-day issues as a desktop technician, but now he got added accountability and duties as the director. And the one thing that was a disadvantage for us is he was not well equipped to challenge his CEO. He was very immature in that way, and he was still that kind of yes man. And he looked like he was maybe going to break down at any moment at some point. So we were also competing with 2 other MSPs for the migration service, and we met with Joe, made a few last ditch efforts, and he was very transparent, told us he really wants to work with us. He knew we were the guys. He agreed that he needed co-managed services, but their CEO is he's notorious. He did a good job growing the food bank, getting into a next level over the past 10 years, but notorious for just being so conscious on price and picking the cheapest thing. Although they have $1 million office furniture, the CEO's salary is public, about $430,000 a year. So we wanted to help him build a business case to get to his CEO, but we could never get a meeting with the CEO. And I tried getting with the executive assistant, left a message, sent him a personal note. I didn't want to get too like stalker-ish, but I wanted them to realize it was more than winning a bid for us. We understand their mission, and we know we could help Joe. Like we know he needs our help, and that was the hardest part, right? That we know we're the right solution. So we got the news from Joe that the CEO didn't go with us. Assuming he did go with the cheapest bid, but we fully expect them probably in the fall to, if Joe doesn't quit, for them to have some pain, and maybe they'll give us a call. So we'll keep in touch, keep in touch with them, and that'll kind of lead here to the lessons learned just overall, through our nonprofit journey, and kind of why you should target them. So the burden of the CEOs or the C-suite with the nonprofits is mission fulfillment and keeping the operating expenses as lean as they possibly can. And so what I'm working on tailoring my approach is to try to teach them a different way of thinking, not really why they should shop cheap, but teach them like how they should shop. So at the C-suite level, I've talked to Doug. We have so many insights that are very common, from our vast experience, over 17 years, and helping them realize that their pain's not special, but then help them understand a problem that they didn't realize they had, which is they're spending way more on IT than they realize, and they have a lot of leakage due to these unplanned expenses, turnover, temporary fixes, downtime. A lot of assets are not tracked. They're running to Best Buy on a whim to buy computers. New employees start. There's nothing ready for the employee. The CEO, I think, at Goodwill was still on an iPhone 7, hoping to get to an iPhone 13. I mean, just crazy, crazy things. But so the food bank is a bit of an exception on a few things. But one thing I've learned from all the other nonprofits is that the C-suite stakeholder loyalty is critical. It's really important when selling to a nonprofit. It's almost an indirect sale to the CEO. So approaching the stakeholders first, kind of like Joe, getting their buy-in and addressing their specific pain, what we could take off his plate so that he can do what he's hired to do. That is what will get your way into, the C-suite level, and then help them understand, teach them the new way of thinking, and then aligning our solutions to their pain and their problems. So, Doug, anything to add on this?
I think you're right on, and I think that in the deals where you can't actually get to the CEO, it hurts. And I also think there's like, I'm not in that situation, but none of us run companies with hundreds of people on the payroll, and I think those, like, I don't know how to put myself in those shoes much, but I can imagine that if I ran a company that had hundreds of people, I would feel like I was responsible for a lot. But then I'm shown 3 IT bids that I can't differentiate and I don't understand. And I probably don't even want to start asking the questions that make me look dumb. And so I think there's something going on in that room where they're not like, they're responsible for a lot and a lot of people and a lot of mission. And a lot of them are kind of, like Ryan mentioned, celebrity, kind of well-known people. But then they're faced with a decision that they're not equipped really to make. So we're trying to figure out how to solve that problem, but we think that that's part of the problem.
Can I ask a question, Doug? In one thing that's kind of conspicuously not on the list is security. And so I was curious, I know the CMMC one, the Lighthouse for the Blind, was a compliance issue largely.
Yeah.
Security come up in the other conversations you had with people in any significant way?
So Goodwill actually had a breach last year, like before they were a client, obviously, like they had a breach. They ended up spending gobs of money, and I think it was almost 3 months before they were able to fully get back up and going. So when you can speak to, like, my clients don't experience things like that, and here's why, I think that goes somewhere. I will tell you, though, that other than the Lighthouse for the Blind, nobody else asked the question. Like, they've all had pain around security, but it wasn't special. Like, it's the same pain that any other business would have, but they're big. All of these people have lots of computers, like, and that creates a security challenge when there's so many actual endpoints.
This is just more of a comment than a question, but I just want to compliment Ryan. He sounds like the type of business development person that we should all want around us. Met Ryan back at the group meeting, and Ryan, just so impressed on how far you've come. Nice work, man.
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate that. All right, so I better nail the end of this presentation. You should, Connor, so thank you. All right, so quickly, so just kind of wrapping it up, I'm going to talk about, just quickly give you an overview of what we're doing to reach out to nonprofits. So this is overall a journey map and our touch points, and I put this together to keep myself, add some process discipline. I'll often do things like this to make sure that I'm staying on track, keeping myself accountable. But the areas that I put stars by are where we're focusing on enhancing and custom tailoring things to the nonprofits. And Connor, I hope you like the shout out to the know, like, and the trust at the top. So back at you there. So I'm going to jump over here to our last slide. And so we're working with a content writer and also Connor's digital marketing agency as Surround for some of my surgical prospecting. So we've targeted 62 nonprofits in the San Antonio area that that fit in our kind of, rudimentary research on their user count and, how they look as potential targets. And so we have gotten emails to 2 to 3 people within that organization, from the C-suite to even some of the IT folks that work there, or some of their, executive directors. And so we started about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks now, sending out email campaigns. And it's around, why work with an MSP, and what common questions that we get from nonprofit organizations around experience. Experience matters when it comes to working, with a strategic partner in the nonprofit space for mission fulfillment. Also, what value do we bring? Educating them. Take it back to, we want to teach them something new. So the weekly campaign is going out. We're also adding blog posts weekly, the same content, onto our nonprofit landing page. We're also capitalizing on the current bigger name nonprofits that we have as clients: Goodwill, Ronald McDonald House, Family Circle of Care, and the Lighthouse for the Blind. And then on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, I'm participating, looking for events that nonprofits have. Yesterday, Wednesday, Big Brothers and Big Sisters hosted a mentoring luncheon, very small group, but the city manager of San Antonio was there. So I got to meet with him and found out, hey, we went to the same high school. He's the oldest of three boys. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And so we actually are going to follow up and meet again and chat. So hopefully that's a really good connection. But I'm posting, on LinkedIn, and our content manager or writer, she's helping post on our social media that, hey, we're more than an MSP. We're a strategic partner, and we understand nonprofits. I'm also participating in a Ronald McDonald House fundraiser for Men Who Cook. You've probably seen it, on LinkedIn or on our social media post as well. So we're doing something there. And then what that's leading to is I'm looking at the data on website traffic, on who's reading the emails and the clicks, and then I'm reaching out via phone, email, or on LinkedIn to different folks, and coming from the perspective that, hey, I want to learn about your nonprofit. What are you guys about? And all of them, I think I have now an extra. I added about 60 more folks from nonprofit agencies into my network on LinkedIn, and they're looking at my profile and they're seeing credibility. So they're engaging with me when I'm reaching out to them in the chat in Sales Navigator or via email. And so that's starting to lead to some FTCs, which I know will lead to some FTAs and some deals, within the next 60 days. So really excited about it, appreciative of all the support and Doug's support, and just happy to share this with you. So with that, Doug, anything else I left out? That's all I have. So.
I mean, I think you covered it great.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing, and my eyes were open to this, is that nonprofit doesn't equal poor company that won't spend on IT. And that was something that I had to figure out as we've met with some of these that are just a different kind of nonprofit. I don't know why there is an influx of these all at one time, other than my hypothesis is they have the same struggle that the other that we do, and that other in-house IT firms do. Attracting good talent is difficult right now. These folks probably don't pay the same. And to be completely honest, it's probably not that attractive of an IT job to an IT person of high caliber. And so I think they're having a staffing squeeze the same way that we might be experiencing it. So that's about the only sort of guess I have for why this is becoming an issue that maybe it wasn't, in the past. But those are just some things I'm trying to put together as to why all of a sudden have we had so many of these pop up, in the last couple months.
I think the things I would add, just kind of reflecting on it, one's kind of a innovative thought, but number one is I think a lesson we can all learn from Ryan is he does a lot of meeting people for coffee or meeting people for breakfast, things that are not kind of an explicit hardcore sales motion, and he gets a lot of momentum from that. Two is, and I would think you would agree with this, Ryan, is this is a particularly good market to get introductions into. if I remember correctly, you mentioned, I think the Ronald McDonald guy gave you an introduction to one of the people that turned into a client. I don't know if I heard that story correctly.
Yeah,
So
it was actually the Meals on Wheels guy, but I'm meeting
Okay.
with the Ronald McDonald guy next Tuesday, the CEO, and we're gonna have coffee. And he already sent me some stuff on where I should get connected to kind of intermingle and network with other nonprofit C-suite. He's gonna help make some introductions. So
in my old life, we used to call it turn your clients into your sales consultants. Like basically you have them tell you how to go and penetrate this market because they're actually in it all the time and they tend to know each other. And the third, just kind of new thought that cropped up is one thing I think is unique about nonprofits. It actually, and maybe I'll ask you if this is true, is I think their board of directors tends to have influence on buying decisions. Is that true or not in these cases? If not, even if not, I actually think another target market might be going after people that are on the boards of the significant one too, and make sure they're included in the campaigns. Because I think I've seen, like in United Way, for example, that group kind of tends to, the board of directors oftentimes is very influential. But it might, as we expand the campaign, I might suggest we think about adding the board of directors people into the campaign.
it's a good call.
I don't know how I could see them being influential in shutting a deal down, because I found out just through the process, like a client and a friend of mine were both on the Goodwill board of directors, and I didn't even know it.
Yep.
I could see where that could have killed a deal. I don't know that it would have made one, but it could have killed one if it hadn't been like good relationships with these people that were already on that board. And in the case of Goodwill, I think they have 20 something people on the board, so it's not like any of them are particularly influential. And it'd be hard to track all of those people. But we had Goodwill with the people that were on that board where they're, oh yeah, I know the guys at Straight Edge, they're great guys, like that kind of thing. So I don't know what that did or didn't do.
Actually interesting. Yeah. Let's play with that a little bit, because I could think then, targeting nonprofits where your clients are on the board, right? So I think there might be something there for us to play with a little bit here, but I don't want to derail Ryan's conversation. So back to you, Ryan.
No, I'm done. That was it, Michael. That was my last slide.
So I think if you kind of pulled back, right, and you guys were advising everybody else. Well, first of all, has anybody else on the call landed a large nonprofit client in the last year? What's that? Tell us about that story real quick, Connor. Who'd you land?
So similar to the one you guys got with the community health center. We have several of those, and we landed another one up in a town called Shelby, Montana, which is about 60 users. So there's a lot of these rural community health centers, same program, that you guys are dealing with. They all know each other very, very well. They all, because they're in rural places, struggle with hiring IT people. And so that's been a good vertical for us, going all the way back to Obamacare, where they got a, boatload of money.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jay? Have you landed one recently? I know you've got some in the past.
Yeah, we picked up 2 in the last year that I can think of, or at least 2022. One is the local urban league, Akron Urban League. So most communities probably have a version of the urban league in their area. So that's worked out well for us. And then I don't know if you'd consider them a nonprofit or not, but we got the Ohio State Democratic Party. So everything that runs through them, and that one's weird because they ramp up a lot of employees during election year and then scale back down. So that's a lot of up and down, but we get to charge for them when they're up.
So I think the other thing I'd like to have a discussion with Ryan and Doug about is, what have you learned? So one thing we've learned is the sales cycles can be long. 2 is, what lessons have you learned in terms of maintaining momentum, I guess, in terms of sales? Is there anything unique about nonprofits, or is it just your typical co-managed sales cycle?
I think you're setting us up to say that like none of them follow a pre-planned plan. Like,
right.
I agree with that. Like we go sell to a law firm with a, managing partner, like it's 3 meetings and we know where we're at. All of these deals were some meandering path to get to like the closure. It was meet with the IT guy a couple times, meet with the executive team, meet with some board people, answer some random questions in like a firing squad,
Right.
go to present the proposal and the CEO doesn't show up because he double booked himself. So then we present once to the IT director and then present the next week to the CEO. Like none of them followed like our normal process. So Ryan and I spent lots of time talking through each one, kind of like, okay, what's the assessment of where we are? What do we think the next best step is? What's the assessment of where we are? What do you think the next best step is? And that's just not as typical as how we track these other ones.
Yeah, I think that you always
they have
got
so much.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, they have so much that they're dealing with because of like the issues, the ongoing issues, the things that there's like a lot of fire drills I've learned. And like the food bank, for example, I mean, my gosh, they're supposed to have this migration project done by September 1st. Initially, they started the process in May. We would go weeks without hearing it. They just made their decision 2 weeks ago, and it's literally probably a good 6-week to 9-week project. I mean, it's just, and it's like, it feels like the urgency has to be on us to push the sale and add that kind of healthy tension without, kind of becoming a stalker. But so that for me, that's what I was trying to figure out, is that balance of that healthy tension and the ways to engage. But yeah, definitely there's not a lot of process discipline, and it's a lot of like whimsical by the seat of your pants things going on within some of within the nonprofits. So you have to be patient and kind of lead them to the water, so.
Yeah.
I would just add 2 quick comments to that. Is how people buy varies, which if, Ryan, you went back to that previous slide, you can see why there's so many pieces and parts. And when you look at STP, there's so many pieces and parts, because how people find you, how they buy does vary. What we were saying earlier about like that CEO challenge is, no matter how they buy, we always have to get on the same page and help them understand what are you buying, because that's to me what they always misdefine, and especially at the CEO level. If you can get the CEO to in lockstep with you on what they're buying, your close rate goes up dramatically. So I think it's 2 different problems. How they buy is all over the place, but what they buy, if you don't get shared understanding on that, good luck.
Justice, you asked a question in the chat that I think is worth talking about, because we had to answer the question too about Goodwill and if it's a franchise. So it's not. They get branding and they get some knowledge transfer from like Goodwill corporate, but like they set the pricing themselves. They pick their own ERP system. They pick their own register configuration and how many stores and what size and all that. Like, I think all Goodwill corporate does is sorts out the regions and then maybe provides them some like, branding and maybe some guidance. But as far as the tech side, they are 100% on their own. That's what we told us.
And their internal IT guy, Willie, that we were talking to, I think he started off right as an executive assistant, maybe, and then self-taught IT guy, and then he's supporting 20 retail locations with another guy that he hires here and there. I mean, it just blows your mind. So.
Yeah, I don't know how to ask this question precisely, but like, how do you balance the IT person with the C-level people, I guess, in a sense? Is the IT person being your advocate, or you're trying to go around with how do you handle that in the sales process? Do you try to go around them, or do you try to partner with them, or how would you describe?
So for me, I want the IT guy to be my advocate, and okay. I'm addressing his personal pain. That's what I've been learning, like understanding that his view isn't organizational. It's his job. So trying to key in on his personal pain and then get that, then have him advocate to the C-suite to get me in the door. And it makes it easier on the C-suite when his employees are in agreement, right, of a big decision. So
I'll add one little thing in there, but every time too, though, once we met the C-level people, we figured out a way to ask the C-level person if they want to keep the guy. Like the C-level people have to confirm that they want to keep the guy somehow. So like we did find that out in every case. Like we pulled somebody over to the side, or we emailed them directly, or we made a phone call and we said, hey, just want to make sure, like, we're looking at this like a done with you, co-managed type of thing. Is that what you want to see here? And they go, yeah, we definitely want to keep the guy. Because if any of them came back and said, you know what, we don't want to keep the guy, you kind of want to know that.
Can I ask another question too? So the one that was Lighthouse of the Blind that hired you guys for the cybersecurity co-managed, did they in your sales process, did they say they felt some extra pressure recently to get compliant in a way that they didn't feel historically, or what was there an immediate catalyst that made them reach out to you guys?
Doug, can I get my first thoughts a little bit?
Go ahead.
From the CFO. So what I took away in meeting the CFO, this is actually one of the first like my onboarding deals I got to sit in with Doug, but my initial perspective was that she had a deliverable to get them in a better place for CMMC compliance, that she waited to the last minute that like maybe it was due Q4, like she waited, and so the pressure now was on her to deliver that outcome. That was my initial.
Was it internal pressure, right? So it was like from her CEO or something like that?
Yeah, the board or the CEO, right, Doug? I mean, that's what that's kind of what I got, Doug. I don't know if you have it.
I also think that in their own industry, they're hearing about CMMC and that it's changing and it's heating up and that this or that or the other. So I think that was the other part too.
Ask Connor and you two guys this too. This whole federally qualified health center thing. Do you think that's a segment worth targeting in a sense? Because you just had two of them come up in the same month, or was it such a random thing for those two things? There's no kind of collective opportunity there.
I mean, I think we should go make a list of all of them, because I know just in talking to them, they love talking about how they are one and how that makes them so different from everybody else. So if you can walk into a meeting and go, FQHC, oh yeah, I got two of them already. I already know what they do. Like, I got it. You'll feel like you're a mile ahead.
And they have money and they have a lot of complexity because they've got pharmacy, they've got dental practices, they've got GP. They're open longer hours than a typical medical practice. So they're complicated and they need a lot of IT, and they've got the money to pay for it.
That may be a good target for people.
The other thing that's awesome about them from the account management standpoint is like the roadmap. Like we put dates on the roadmap, but if they go close a grant that has an IT component, they just buy the next thing on the roadmap, because like they have to spend the money. Hey, we just got $25,000 in a grant. Some of it includes IT stuff. What's the next thing on the roadmap? And we're like, y'all were slated to spend 12 grand on a Wi-Fi project. They go, great, we're going to do that next month instead of next quarter. Like, and before that, they would do nothing or not know what to do or just misuse those funds.
Okay, that's one last question from my standpoint. Then with the exception of the food bank deal, was in those other deals, how competitive were they? Were some of them like sole sourced, or did they all have a competitive component?
They were all competitive. We didn't talk about it either, but we lost one that we were working on with the Girl Scouts in San Antonio. That was another one that we lost that was in our pipe. They were all competitive. They were all sort of like, fill out, or like, here's the requirements, here's the RFP, but they were all definitely competitive.
My opinion in this, by the way, too, is that I think this is like reflective of the market as much as anything. Right. I think that they are in particular probably having a hard time staffing. And so I think it could be a good, Let me ask one last question too. Was the credentials you had with other nonprofits, were they kind of essential in the sales process? Like, is that something they mentioned about why they hired you, is because you work with other nonprofits?
I don't know if any of them said that was a reason, but Ryan hit that really hard. Like in the meeting, we would talk about like, we understand your plight. We would talk about like nonprofit pricing, and we would talk about helping them leverage, programs from Microsoft and Cisco and, that kind of thing. So I think they liked that. And then if they went and researched, hopefully they went and saw like on our social that that's all true. Like we really do have relationships with nonprofits, but I'm sure it helped in some way. Nobody said that specifically.
Yeah, like Girl Scouts, for example, and even, some other deals that, that we lost, like, I'm making it a point out, Doug, is to go in and try to connect with the decision maker and get like some kind of after action. What can we do better to refine our process so we can gather data to continue to get better? And I know, and I was happy to hear this with the Girl Scouts, we lost the RFP, but our pricing was in line. But there were some concerns. They didn't want to do a lot of the work to migrate over, it sounded like, and then they didn't have a lot of confidence in our ability to support their phones, I think, came up, which then told me, maybe we could have done a little bit better job, like showing the value proposition of how we could have supported their phones. So I'm trying to get some after action data to learn.
That's interesting. Yeah.
From it, so.
So I think, does anybody else have any questions on this? Just out of curiosity, how many people on the phone would say nonprofit is one of their top things they're going after? Top three. Jay, Mike, okay. Richard, we'll talk later.
Would you go back to slide 4, Ryan? It's just, that should make you proud, Michael. I mean, it's just, there's so much work, that goes into all of these different pillars, call them whatever you want. There's a lot of great pillar stuff there. And, it's hats off to Doug and Ryan and the team for continuing to, get better and better at all these things. It's not easy.
Oh, that's good.
Hi, I've got a question for you guys. Doug, you mentioned nonprofit pricing, and do you in fact offer discounted pricing to nonprofits?
No, I don't.
I mean, not in the way that you're thinking about it.
You should watch Paul Dipple's presentation on discounting and what it does to gross margin.
I also don't. I just don't think you do it, honestly. I mean, I think the other thing, you just triggered a thought for me, Eric, too, is I think there's a big difference between the types of nonprofits we're talking about here versus kind of run-of-the-mill nonprofits, right? So I think we always got to distinguish: are we going after the co-managed kind of big ones, which is this presentation's been about? And I found almost unequivocally, and I think your guys' experiences ratified it, is price is not a consideration. Price is maybe not the prime consideration, certainly in choosing you guys. Because what Ryan said, even in the one you lost, you were competitive, right? Price-wise.
Yeah, we're always finding that we're pricing these well, and that we're definitely not bottom feeding and trying to undercut, and like that's not at all. Like we're always in the right range. And it's always like an acceptable range for us to like operate.
The other thing the sales process is, to be honest with you, is establish value way beyond price being the consideration, right? Which a lot of this does, right? So I wouldn't say in your case, Eric, if we want to, in your case, I don't know if Renato's still on, right? If we're going after some nonprofits now, we just want to make sure that we're aiming at the kind of bigger ones, right? Because they operate more like businesses, frankly.
The one thing that I'll add, though, is while we don't do discounting either, one of the things we've learned is in the nonprofit space, they do expect you to participate in whatever their gala is, their fundraiser or whatever. So anticipate that you will have some sort of sponsorship involved. Some of the nonprofits we work with, like the local zoo, actually wrote it into the agreement that we will be an X sponsor at their annual fundraiser every year as part of that. So while it's not a discount necessarily, it is something that if you're going to work in the nonprofit space, be aware to kind of budget in. I'm curious if anybody else has that same burden.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is when we open up, and we're different given our small markets, but when we open up a small market, we always pick one nonprofit that's recognizable and pretty small and manageable, and we donate managed services to them. And so, so in Missoula, it's Missoula Food Bank. In the Bitterroot, it's Bitterroot Youth Homes. Up in Kalispell, there's a free medical clinic up there. None of these are probably more than 20 desktops, but it gives us that, good positive local reference, and then a good story and a really recognizable nonprofit that a lot of the other community leaders are involved with. So but once we do that one, there's no discounting, past that. And so anyway, that's another little piece.
Yeah, to your point, Connor, I talked to the Rape Crisis Center in San Antonio, which actually they have about 40 end users, and she was telling me about their current MSP where they have pain. They do have pain, but that MSP donated 6 months worth of free, services whenever they had trouble with a grant. So,
And help me with your prospect list that you're going after, Ryan. I mean, did you have, I think you said the number was, did you say the number was in the 60s or the 120s? I can't quite remember your number.
No, it's 62 nonprofits, and they range from like 20 end users up to, like United Way, like in the several hundred, or food banks like 200, 240. So just up, from there.
And I'm guessing there's no shortage of the top of the list, right? I mean, the top of the list isn't like 3 companies, right?
No,
dozens.
There's a ton. There's some I've never heard of that I didn't realize were so big. And there are a lot of military affiliated or like military mission pointed nonprofits that I never heard of that are pretty big also, that I'm trying to capitalize on my former USA, as a former USA employee and having family in the military to try to get my foot in the door with some of them as well. So.
One last question, Jay, besides the 2 that you mentioned that are recent, let's spread it. What other big nonprofits? Because I think you do things in like housing, right? Don't you have a whole bunch in like a niche?
So we there's a group of nonprofits in this area that are basically fair housing contact services. So you're all probably aware that if you are a landlord, an apartment, you rent out apartments or whatever, that you have to adhere to all of these laws regarding fair housing. And in most communities, there's a nonprofit that basically represents tenants to challenge bad landlords. So we've picked up a few of those nonprofits.
Yeah, my recollection too with you is you kind of got them similar to Doug, where they came, I could be wrong in this one, but they came in a bunch, or not a bunch, but a sequence of them.
Well, they all know each other, right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about nonprofits is they tend to not be as competitive as other businesses with each other, kind of like municipalities. So, if you can make good inroads with one, usually they'll talk to the other. So, there's if you're in a metropolitan area like us, where there's a lot of separate communities, you have the same nonprofit in each community that's kind of part of the same larger national organization, but they each run independently. So Boys and Girls Clubs, the Better Business Bureau, food banks and Goodwill, like Doug mentioned, and there's all of those. So if you can just get in with one of them, they'll typically refer you to the others in the area because they all know each other.
Okay. All right, so we're running up to the end. Anybody else have any questions for either Ryan or Douglas? Yeah, I'm gonna I'll talk to you guys individually afterwards too, but if these kinds of sessions are valuable, I'd like to start to doing one, like maybe one a month or one every other month, where you actually talk about a specific type of opportunity. The thing I'm always toying in my head is I'm also wondering whether there's ways that we can kind of piggyback off of what Ryan and Douglas are doing, or what we've learned in nonprofits, some kind of smaller kind of little working group with your marketing people and your business development people. So I'll play that idea out in my brain a little bit. But I just would encourage people not to just treat this as kind of like a webinar, but just think about it as kind of a launching pad to start doing something similar for yourself in nonprofit, and particularly kind of at the larger co-managed nonprofits, because I think it might be a kind of market timing thing too. So, and I will echo what Connor said. Ryan, how long have you been there now? You've been there since April of this year?
March 21st.
No, I'll round that up to April, March. So then you, and the cool thing I like about Ryan is it was interesting because I don't mean it's to sound the way I'm going to say it, but you had like 0 business development experience in your past, right? So in like 6 months, little, right? So in 6 months, he's developed this kind of what I would say is almost like an owner-led sales presence in San Antonio. And I think it's been a good sandbox for the rest of us, because San Antonio was a tough nut to crack until recently, right? I think Doug's face will tell that all, but usually what it really required was somebody that was kind of owned the market in a sense, but also truly did work through the 6 pillars, right? Really did all the stuff of like meeting people and that, you know, relying on either digital marketing or volume prospecting, because it had never worked in San Antonio before. So I think this is just the beginning of a beautiful trend for you guys down there, and we'll just kind of accelerate it. But I do want to do some thinking about how we can, I guess, share what the success they're having and share success what you guys are having in nonprofit, and kind of get it into like a place where it can be leveraged more broadly across the group.
The other thing I'd like to applaud Doug on what he's done with. So first, congrats to Doug and Ryan for your guys' successes. This is an awesome story. You know, one of the things that I recall, and I know I've already shared this with Doug, so he'll have heard this, but, you know, I remember not that long ago when Doug was like, you know, I've sold every single business in Corpus Christi that could possibly buy from me. There's none left. You know, I've tapped the market. And I think what I've heard is he's basically gone back and looked at it all through a different lens and found that there were some organizations he could sell to. So I appreciate your resilience and being able to come back and look at it from a different angle, because it looks like it's paid off. So good for you.
Yeah. Opening up co-managed, opening up some security only offering. Like, yeah, we got more, we got more open water than we thought, for sure.
All right, everybody. So I'm going to make this recording available to people. Doug, if you want to just send me or Doug or Ryan, if you guys want to just send me the PowerPoint, I can forward it to everybody, or you can send it to them, either way. And thank you guys for making the time. And like I said, I would really encourage you guys to think about how you, rather than just sit and listen to the webinar, think about how you can start applying the same things in your local market. Yeah.
Yep. See you guys in Park City.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and just